The year is 1793. Across the cities and villages of France, liberty's cry echoes, and so does the snap of the guillotine. The revolution, once heralded as the dawning light of a new age, has sunk into shadows. Suspicion rules the streets. Justice lies bleeding in the squares, where heads fall daily. And among the many voices that dared to speak truth in such times, one still whispers to us: Thomas Paine. Born in Thetford, England in 1737, Thomas Paine was never one to kneel before power. A self-made man and a relentless advocate of reason and rights, Paine rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most influential political philosophers of the Enlightenment. His pamphlet Common Sense did more than stir the American colonies to rebellion. It transformed a call for reform into a cry for independence. His The Rights of Man wasn't just a defense of the French Revolution. It was a thunderous indictment. By the early 1790s, Paine had become a citizen of 3 revolutions: English by birth, American by service, and French by belief. He saw in France the next great chapter of liberty's story. Welcomed as a hero, he was elected to the National Convention. Yet what he encountered in Paris was not a clear march toward justice. It was a revolution devouring itself. Violence replaced vision. The streets of Paris ran red with the blood of both monarchists and former allies. Amid the clamor for vengeance, Paine he spoke out, boldly and publicly, against the execution of Louis XVI, not out of sympathy for royalty, but because he believed no republic built on revenge could endure. In Paine's eyes, the revolution had become a monster of its own making. For this, and for his opposition to the rising power of Robespierre and the Jacobins, Paine was arrested in December 1793, thrown into Luxembourg prison. He waited in a cell as others were marched to the scaffold. By chance, some say, divine providence, his prison due. It was in that moment of isolation and impending death that Paine wrote the letter you are about to read. To the citizens of France is not a speech for crowds, nor a proclamation for history books. It is a plea, urgent, honest, and personal. It speaks not from the heights of victory, but from the depths of disillusionment. In it, Paine warns of the revolution's betrayal of its own ideals. He reminds the people of France that justice cannot grow from fear, and that liberty cannot coexist with institutional terror. The historical moment in which this letter was written was among the darkest in France's revolutionary journey. Economically, the country was on the verge of collapse. Inflation soared. Bread was scarce. The war against external monarchies drained resources and morale. Politically, power had concentrated into the hands of the Committee of Public Safety, a name bitterly ironic, given its role in orchestrating mass acts. Amid this turmoil, Thomas Paine, who had stood with Washington, debated Burke, and helped forge 2 republics, now found himself condemned by the very ideals he had fought for. And yet, he refused to retreat into silence. Into the citizens of France, Paine does not call for a return to monarchy. He does not seek to undermine the republic. He calls instead for a return to reason, to the true spirit of revolution, one built not on bloodlust, but on human dignity. He mourns what France has become, but still clings to what it could be. In the letter's closing lines, he leaves behind a whisper, not a shout, a testament written in dark. This document was suppressed. It was too dangerous to be published at the time, and too honest to be ignored by history forever. It survived not because it was heard, but because it deserved to be. Today, more than 2 centuries later, Paine's words echo as clearly as ever. In every society, where freedom is twisted into fear, where justice becomes a tool of vengeance, and where revolutions turn inward upon themselves, this letter speaks. It is a mirror held to the soul of any nation that dares to reinvent itself, warning not to lose its humanity in the process. Thomas Paine's voice was nearly silenced. But now, finally, it speaks again. Let us listen.
To the citizens of France, I write to you from the shadow of a revolution that promised liberty but has birthed tyranny. You, the people of France, who rose against the chains of monarchy, now find yourselves bound by new chains, those forged by fear and vengeance. I am no stranger to your cause. I have stood with you, pen in hand, to proclaim the rights of man. Yet, I cannot stand silent as the guillotine drowns out the voice of reason. This letter may never reach you, for the air is thick with suspicion, and the hands that carry words are oft deemed treacherous. I write to warn you. A revolution that devours its own children is no revolution but a beast. You sought justice, yet you have unleashed terror. You sought equality, yet you have crowned new despots. The blood of the innocent stains the streets, and I ask you, citizens, is this the republic you dreamed of? I am an Englishman by birth, an American by choice, and a Frenchman by heart. Yet I fear I am become an enemy to those who rule you now. They call for my silence, but I will not yield. I write to you, unknown faces of France, to plead for the soul of your revolution. Turn back from this path of slaughter. Seek not vengeance, but reconciliation. Let not the ideals of liberty be buried beneath the scaffold. If these words are lost, as I fear they may be, let them stand as my testament. I have loved your cause, but I cannot love its cruelties. Should this letter find no reader, let it linger in the shadows, a whisper of what might have been. Yours, in the name of liberty, Thomas Paine.
Final reflection, a letter never delivered. When the ink dried on Thomas Paine's letter to the citizens of France, it carried the weight of a conscience in rebellion against a revolution it once revered. But the letter never reached the public. It was written in secret, under threat of death, from within the walls of Luxembourg prison in late 1793 or early 1794. It was, almost certainly, suppressed by those in power. In the era of Robespierre and the Jacobins, a voice that questioned the violence of the revolution was treated as more dangerous than the monarchs it once defied. Paine's letter was a warning, a plea to turn back from the abyss. But it was also a mirror held up to the revolution itself. What he saw, and what he asked others to see, was the harrowing truth that the French Revolution had begun to devour the very ideals it claimed to defend. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These 3 words, etched into banners and speeches, had become bloodied with contradiction. The guillotine, once imagined as a tool of justice, had become the emblem of paranoia. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which Paine had helped defend and explain to the world, rang hollow in a nation that silenced critics and rewarded denunciations. Paine found himself trapped in a paradox, a revolutionary jailed by the revolution he helped sustain. He had opposed tyranny in monarchs, and now opposed it in republicans. But there was little room in Jacobin France for such nuance. His rejection of vengeance, his appeal to mercy, his belief in reason over fear, these made him dangerous to those who ruled by blade and slogan. And so, his letter remained unread. His voice, temporarily, was buried. Yet history would not forget. After Robespierre's downfall in mid-1794, Paine was released from prison. He emerged frail and shaken, but unbroken. He resumed writing and continued to believe in the idea of a just republic, even as he grew more disillusioned with politics. Though he remained in France for several more years, he was increasingly isolated, no longer the celebrated figure he once was, but a relic of an earlier, more hopeful phase of the revolution. In 1802, he returned to the United States, his adopted home, but found little welcome. His fierce criticism of organized religion in the Age of Reason had turned much of the American public against him. He was labeled an atheist, a radical, a danger to civil order. Once hailed as the moral voice of liberty, he now lived in obscurity and poverty, ignored by the very government he had helped inspire. ThomasPaine died on June 8, 1809, in New York, at the age of 72. Only 6 people attended his funeral. No state funeral, no crowds, no official recognition. He was buried on a modest farm in New Rochelle, and in death, as in much of his later life, he was alone. But the story did not end there. Over the following centuries, Paine's writings would rise again, rediscovered, reprinted, reinterpreted. Today, he is rightly recognized as one of the most powerful voices of the Enlightenment and one of the few thinkers who gave revolution both fire and conscience. His suppressed letter to the citizens of France stands as both warning and witness. Warning of what happens when power replaces principle, and witness to the fact that even when silenced, the truth finds a way to speak again. To the citizens of France was not read in the streets where it was meant to echo. It was not circulated among deputies or printed in pamphlets. It lived in the margins of Paine's despair, buried under the fear of a society gone mad. And yet today, centuries later, we read it not as a relic, but as a voice reclaimed, because the contradictions Paine exposed are not locked in the past. Every revolution risks losing its way. Every democracy walks the line between ideal and reality. Every generation must decide whether to follow the mob or follow the truth. Paine's life was proof that integrity may come at a great cost, but silence costs even more. His letter was never delivered, but now, finally, it is received. Let us not take it lightly.